Flight 2511, the mystery at 16,000 feet. A night like any other, January 6th, 1960. The air in Idlewild Airport, New York, is cold and brisk. Passengers shuffle through the terminal, wrapped in coats and carrying overnight bags, briefcases, valentines of ordinary life. National Airlines Flight 2511, a Douglas DC-6B, is scheduled for an overnight run to Miami. A 6-hour glide through a winter sky that feels routine to everyone on board. We open on a montage of small rituals. A woman fastening a lullaby to her child's face. A businessman checking his wallet. 2 sailors laughing about shore leave. The DC-6's engines spool. The cabin lights dim. Outside, city noise blurs into the steady hum of 4 radial engines as the plane climbs into a starlit corridor. It would be hours before anyone would know how ordinary, how human, the passengers of Flight 2511 had been. The people, faces and quiet lives, spend time with individual vignettes. Human detail roots the tragedy. Captain Robert Sawyer, veteran pilot, steady hands, a father who never missed Sunday dinners. He is introduced in the cockpit, careful pre-flight, a small joke with the first officer about cold coffee. First Officer Thomas McClendon, younger, affable, calling his wife after boarding to say "see ya in Miami" while finishing a crossword. Julian Frank, presented carefully, a business executive in his early 30s. He smiles in photos, signs for a heavy suitcase, and buys a travel-sized newspaper at the stand. Subtle hints, recent phone calls, discussions of money, an insurance agent's stamp on a receipt. Important, make clear this is the official suspect, but the story will explore doubt. Other passengers, a young couple returning from a weekend trip, a retired teacher with a sweater stuffed under her arm, a man carrying a small wooden box of chess pieces, snapshots that emphasize the ordinary. These vignettes are small cinematic moments. A gloved hand smoothing a newspaper, a mother rocking a sleeping child, flight attendants stowing a thermos. The goal: the viewer cares about these people before grief arrives. The flight: calm, then catastrophe. The DC-6 reaches cruise at roughly 16,000 feet. The cockpit chatter dwindles. The cabin is quiet. A low, constant roar. The sound of flight continues uninterrupted. At 2:03 a.m., a sudden blinding flare. The narrative slows to a few staccato images. A lavatory door slammed. A window looking out at a night suddenly ripped open. The steel and rivets of the fuselage flexing. Then the sound. Not the engines, but a violent concussion. And the world breaks into shards. Cut to witnesses on the ground in rural North Carolina. A roaring sound, a streak of light, a house light flipping on as a fireball briefly illuminates trees. Dogs bark. A farmer curses at the sky. Debris begins falling like macabre confetti, a literal scattering of lives. The crash scene, forensics in the cold. Investigators arrive at a rural, burned landscape that looks almost otherworldly. Charred earth, twisted metal, a ring of smoking fragments. Here, the story slows into methodical detail. Fragment mapping. Teams map hundreds of fragments across fields and woodlots. The distribution suggests midair breakup. The tail section has impact marks, consistent with separation at altitude. Blast patterns. Examiners find fuselage panels with holes that radiate outward from a central point. The metal is bent away from that point, consistent with an internal explosion. Rivets have been blown outward. Human remains and pattern of injuries. Some victims are found with injuries clustered near the suspected blast origin, while others show trauma consistent with high-velocity impact and fire. Explain the forensic tools of 1960. Metallurgical testing, residue analysis, witness statements, and physical mapping. Make clear both the strengths and the limitations. Early forensic science could identify shrapnel patterns and blast trajectories, but lacked modern trace chemical detectors and sophisticated explosive residue analyses. Voiceover. They had patterns, they had fragments, but what they didn't have, the neat, conclusive evidence modern labs could produce, left room for interpretation. The official investigation, rapid conclusions. The FBI and Civil Aeronautics Board take the lead. Walk the viewer through the official timeline. Initial reconstruction. Investigators piece the airframe back together as best they can. The center rear fuselage and lavatory area are implica. Shrapnel analysis. Fragments from the hull match metallic fragments consistent with a high-order explosive, not structural failure. Behavioral profiling. Attention turns to the passenger whose remains were nearest the blast, Julian Frank. Investigators reveal recent life insurance policies, financial problems, and potential motives. Circumstantial evidence. Timing of purchase of policies. Oddities in luggage. The FBI announces that Frank likely carried the explosive and detonated it. A suicide bombing for payout. The official record closes the case with a named culprit. But this is not the end. It is the beginning of persistent doubt. Doubts, holes, and competing theories. Now, dig into the reasons why many refuse to accept the official story. This is the meat of the mystery. Explore each alternative carefully and with evidence-based skepticism. The technical doubts device sophistication. Analysts and later independent experts noted the blast signature suggested a compact, professionally made device that distributed shrapnel in a particular pattern, more sophisticated than what a desperate individual might cobble together from household items. Detonator absence. No clear triggering mechanism was recovered. Where was the fuse? How was the explosive armed? The lack of identifiable initiator parts left room for a different operative profile. Injury inconsistency. Some of Frank's wounds were not the kind typically found at blast epicenters. Some experts argued his injuries could be explained by post-impact trauma or being thrown against metal, not direct proximity to an explosive. The behavioral doubts. Witness reports painted Frank as unusually calm and friendly before boarding. Family members insisted that the short, domestic-style insurance purchases were not out of character. Why would someone planning mass murder act normal, buy a paper, and chat with companions? The alternative hypotheses. A professional saboteur. Someone planted a timed device in the lavatory or rear baggage area. They escaped detection because the late-night flight had low traffic and dim lighting. Motive could vary: an assassination attempt, organized crime, or a targeted insurance fraud gone wrong. Mistaken identity, wrong target. Perhaps the bomber intended a different flight or a different person on board, and Flight 2511 was tragically in the wrong place at the wrong time. Cover up for each theory, present the supporting evidence and the holes in that evidence. Keep the tone skeptical and investigative, not conspiratorial. The human cost, families and aftermath. Bring the tragedy back to individuals. Interview excerpts or dramatized quotes if interviews are not available. from family members, rescue workers, and local reporters show the long-term human impact. The widow's grief and struggle for answers. The small town of Bolivia, North Carolina, was stunned to find wreckage on its farms. The airline's public relations team is balancing grief and liability. Mental health impacts on investigators who sleep poorly, imagining the final minutes. Here, slow, reflective pacing helps. A single violin note, a lingering visual of a child's toy among the wreckage. The viewer needs to feel the weight. Technical appendix: how a bomb destroys an airframe. For the aviation-savvy viewer, include a clear but accessible explanation. A blast inside a pressurized fuselage creates a shock wave and a localized overpressure that can sever structural members. When load-bearing structures fail at altitude, aerodynamic forces tear the fuselage apart, often leading to rapid breakup and secondary fragmentation. Explain why a rear lavatory blast can cause tail separation. The fuselage at that point includes critical attachments and control cable runs. Add diagrams or simple animations that show force vectors and panel blowouts. The long shadow: changes in security and memory. Although Flight 2511 predates the modern security era, it contributed to an evolving awareness that aircraft could be vulnerable from within. Demonstrate how early incidents like this foreshadowed later security measures, including baggage checks, scrutiny of suspicious travel patterns, and insurance regulations. Discuss how the case remains a subject for aviation historians and cold case enthusiasts. Petitions for re-examination, modern forensic retests where possible, and scholarly debates emphasize that a lack of closure is a particular kind of cruelty. What we never learned. Conclude with a restrained but haunting sequence. Return to the montage of faces from the prologue, overlaying them with facts that remain unresolved. No detonator conclusively identified. No arrest was ever made. The FBI's final assertion stands on circumstantial mapping and motive. Voiceover: official answers offer a name. The wreckage offers facts. Between them lies a silence that still echoes. And with an invitation for viewers to reflect, to read the old reports, and to consider how technology and compassion might someday give the victims the final dignity of truth.